Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to look at Bricky's What is Warhammer 40,000 timeline of 40k lore. I know something about this subject because I am a small, minor fan of this. I'm really looking forward to doing this one because, I just like 40k stuff and I've been jonesing for more, and since there's no more TTS, and that's a terrifying thought, I'm going to do this. Is it a way to scratch the itch? Yes. There is a lot of ways to look into the 40k lore. Overarching, short timeline, new timelines, events, books, I don't know. But I want to see what his take is because I kind of like this. I'm a geek. I know. Shocking. Otherwise, you guys know what to do. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. I don't know anything about Bricky. I don't know if it's good or not, but I'm going to hope so because I like 40k stuff. And if it's funny, even a little bit, I'm going to laugh my ass off. And if it's informative, I'm going to really geek out because I like learning new things about franchises I spend way too much time obsessing over. I'm going to stop that there because I might admit to how long, and I would rather avoid that. It's way too embarrassing for anyone who's not my wife, who's already well aware of it.
In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium exists the Empire of Man, a backwards carcass of an empire comprised of many devoted forces. Gigantic.
Devoted is, that's a stretch for a few of them. They're very something. That is, probably more that he would get into right away, I know. And honestly, I love that he chose an image of the Castus Knight. I love these knights. They're absolutely ridiculous. They're incredibly silly to look at because they're so exposed on all the joints. But goddamn, they like look cool. I don't have one because they're expensive, but it looks neat.
Robot knights, religious machine cultists, and incredibly heavily armored women, most likely with sweltering abs. And one must know what those abs taste like.
Is that actually a fetish? You know what? I just asked that online. Of course someone's going to say it is. Ugh. Tasting sweat. Why? I wasn't expecting that to be my reaction. I wasn't expecting to say that in this video. I mean, sure, they came up with the Bolter nuns and, nuns with guns, man. Also, canonically, the armor was designed by a crazed sex fiend who had massive fetishes, but also paid for literally the best shit ever. So, yeah, it looks like that for a reason in lore. That also makes sense considering that they later offed him for being all of those things. It actually does look good. Oh, the chanting. Nice.
The age of knowledge and enlightenment has ended.
Ain't that the truth?
The age of darkness has begun.
Almost like there's a dark empire even.
Roughly
or a dark
60
king at the
million
head.
years ago, there existed...
Okay, so he's going all the way back. This is actually relevant because, depending on some of the timelines, war in heaven, man. For anyone who doesn't realize that, that's a big-ass war that happens at the beginning, and most people kind of know a little bit about it because, yeah, the robots fought the guys we don't really know much about who brought up the spacey elf ears people. Because they're not elves for technical reasons that are very much because Games Workshop got sued.
Aliens.
Or failed to sue people.
And these aliens lived short, painful lives.
Yeah, and they like to build pyramids. Just random fact that doesn't have any relevance to anything else.
Worlds and often died of various cancers before the age of 30. These aliens, the necron tier, looked up to the stars and found extreme beings of real power. Beings with the ability to create life.
The image he's using right now, before anyone gets a misidea, it's technically a slan or whatever from Sigmar or previously Fantasy, which is the closest idea most people have to what an old one looks like. These guys right here is what he's talking about, but it's not actually them because there is no official art of them. Just things that are maybe official. And then there's Rogue Trader, which no, just don't fuck with Rogue Trader. It's just weird. And also, literally, Games Workshop doesn't want you to because they have some very copyright issue pieces in there, like a actual character named Obi-Wan Sherlock Clouseau. You know, a 3-way lawsuit. Sorry, no, 4-way. Menage. Oh, screw me. Yeah, you should probably avoid that.
The old ones of the galaxy. They asked these old ones for help. Please cure us of our ailments. To which the old ones said, piss off. So the Necron tier gathered.
I mean, ironically, that's not actually a joke. from the Necron tier perspective, that is exactly how they took it. And it's been commented on multiple times by people whose memories are heavily eroded and probably damaged. So it's how they took it, not maybe how it actually went. Now, what they actually said? No one else was there, and the people who do know it were heavily unreliable due to millennia of degradation on their memory.
Gathered together and did the sensible thing. They declared war upon these old beings and were promptly beaten into the dirt back to their short, painful lives. In
the worst planet they had too.
Warhammer, there is a hell. This hell is not like you and I know it. It's more of an afterlife, a place where dead souls end up. This place,
I mean, back then, yes. Now it is exactly like we know it, and probably a little worse.
Place has many names: the Empyrean, the Sea of Souls, the Immaterium, and the Ether. But most
also, what is most accurate, the oh fuck, not there place. Because if there's one thing about 40k that's accurate, it's everything I just said, and also all the teeth behind him. It's a rough representation of what the warp looked like when put into the Materium in a storm. And that's probably, I can't speak today apparently. It's basically the best way to look at what the Imperium, or sorry, the warp is. Things that want to eat you with too many mouths and all the teeth.
Mostly, we just call it the warp. While you and I know of hell as a place of horrors and punishment, the warp isn't really that.
Yeah, they don't punish people. That comes extra. They torture everyone for free.
Beginning, it's energy, but the kind of energy formed from thought and soul, psychic energy, where the dead souls of people end up in a place that is impossible to understand. No laws of reality exist. Like, time is merely a suggestion, and it is not something that can be braved easily. The warp would be like sailing the ocean in a pirate movie.
I guess because in a pirate movie, things are more malleable, and reality is whatever the writer wants to make it because they have more leeway due to the time period. It makes sense because, well, if you did something fantastical in a more modern setting, if you did something fantastical in a pirate movie, it's like, ooh, cool usage of random things people actually believed could happen. Also, just giant squids being a thing is kind of hilarious to me. Not that they ever attacked ships, most likely. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, weird shit happens. I doubt it happened, but also, yeah, that's basically the warp. It's basically, we have no idea what the fuck's going on. Let's step into it.
Jump from your ship would be certain death.
Yes.
To stay in the sea for too long on your boat could drive a man mad. And
hell, in some cases, killing yourself is safer because whoever might grab your soul has a better chance of doing it if you do it in a safe place rather than going into the warp where it will exclusively be the property of whoever bites it first. That's not a joke. That's actually how it goes.
And there are many dangerous things lurking in those depths.
Yeah.
Yet the sea is not evil. It simply is.
Debatable. It simply is in the time period he's talking about most recently. In the future where the freaking parasites are around, the chaos gods, no, it's basically been corrupted beyond all reason. It is very evil at that point.
Mostly. There are more malevolent beings in those waters, areas that you do not sail towards. This would be known as the realm of chaos.
That is a unique way to put it, because saying it's a realm of chaos in the warp is kind of weird, but also not entirely wrong, because there are specific realms that are enforced by powers, specifically the chaos gods, and they break themselves off for the demons. But calling it a realm is not the most common way, just because it's not wrong, but it's also not right. Because a realm makes it think that there's the warp, and then there's that little part of it on the side that's chaos, which isn't really true, because distance is a aspect of how far can you project yourself and your own power. For a person, that is no. For a god who can project its power with its minions and its ability to reach out and say, fuck you in particular, it's almost the entire warp, because nothing contests it that we're aware of. The weird part is that the warp specifically is a galaxy-centered option, but there are exclusively extragalactic sources of threat from the Tyranids in this setting, so not sure what the implication is there. Mostly when Games Workshop made it up, they didn't think beyond the galaxy is the biggest thing they could imagine, so they probably just didn't think about it so far.
The realm of chaos exists in the warp as a special area led by 3 chaos gods.
Three?
Khorne, the god of combat, murder, and slaughter, with a pile of skulls.
3?
Khorne, the god of combat, murder,
There's
and slaughter,
not
with a
3.
pile of skulls taken in his name.
Is he just ignoring
Tzeentch,
Slaanesh?
god of change, mystery, and deceit.
He
A
probably has to.
confusing paradox of lies, schemes, and sorceries. And Nurgle, god of rot, pestilence, and Genshin Impact.
Yeah, no, this checks out. He probably would play Genshin Impact. He would be a Deo player. As someone who hasn't played Genshin in a long time and barely knows what's going on, I've been told that is a cutting argument. I have no idea what he just said. And I also realized why he's not mentioning Slaanesh, because he wants to be able to come back to YouTube and not lose his channel immediately. And anything Slaanesh, yeah, I'm not going to explain for the same reason. He's not going to go into detail.
Impact. All things rot in the end, and Grandfather Nurgle is waiting for you with open arms. These gods ruled their respective realm in the warp, sending their many followers against each other in the...
Oh, he's talking about how Slaanesh wasn't created yet. Technically, because of how time is bullshit. Even if it hasn't happened yet, it also has already happened. Because Slaanesh's creation works in retcon fashion. I exist now, so I existed before. You just didn't know it yet, and I wasn't as powerful. Which also is literally how that kind of thing does work.
The great game to be the most powerful of all the gods. So the warp exists,
but also never to win
Hell is real, parallel to our galaxy, with the realm of chaos and its gods fighting for control. But
also, fun thing about that, in Age of Sigmar, when Games Workshop finally had Chaos win, prior to it starting, they destroyed the previous fantasy setting. Chaos won! It destroyed everything, and they got bored and left. Yeah, I mean, it was probably infinity to 100 years to less than a day to a second to another couple of centuries. But they got bored and they left, and then things restarted because they are not good at winning for long. Chaos doesn't do the permanency thing, including their own victories.
there are also gods of real space, gods of the normal world too. They're called Catan,
And
and
somehow
they
more
eat
asshole-ish.
stars.
You think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he's created?
These
In this case, that's accurate. Although these were interesting because they were called gods by the people who worshiped them, but they were beings that existed already. Although there is an implication that there was a previous war to the war in heaven, which is what he's going to talk about most likely, between the Catan and the old ones where they were heavily diminished, but that is only hinted at most. So it's not unmentioned in 40K, but the further back you go, the less you have. And honestly, the stuff he's talking about now is super spotty in general.
These star gods saw the plight of our poor Necron tier and how the old ones cast them aside and said, you know what? You guys want immortality? Oh, we will make it happen. We are...
Okay, two things to say. One, he's telling this definitely from the perspective of what these, or the Necron tier, would actually say to themselves. This is how they presented it. It's not how it happened. And the reason it's that the way they present it, the entire immortality thing, is because the guy on the screen right now is called the Deceiver. He is, and you're going to be surprised about this, a tricky person who, and this is going to be shocking, deceives. I know, it's hard to believe. I mean, look at this face. This is the face of someone who feels like I need to censor his head, actually. Just a bit, yeah. The actual thing that happened was they found them, they put them into body as energy, and then found out, oh shit, they're self-aware and really fucking powerful in these metal bodies we gave them. And then they started talking because before being put in the bodies, which they didn't have before, they were just energy beings surrounding a star and passively eating it, and also corrupting the star to cause the cancers that later killed the Necron tier. You know, it's literally all their fault. They didn't actually kind of interact or do much. But when put into bodies, they had all the power, which is kind of implying that in the initial fight between the Necron tier and the old ones, they might have already had bodies and they were reduced, but that is reaching on such a level that it's more or less speculation at best.
Are the gods of the tangible, of real space. We can give you a cure. So then they ate all their souls.
Yeah, that is exactly how that happened. That's not even a
and
joke.
turn them into robotic automaton, feasting on their souls and leaving a hollow shell of an intelligence left that is technically immortal. With the
Although the entire thing about the soul is depends on the writer. Most of the time, the standard line is exactly what he said, and that's how most writers treat it. I say most because every now and again, a writer's like, well, I want to hint that maybe they still have a soul, or a tiny, weak, barely there. It doesn't even count as more than just self-awareness soul. And that doesn't seem to be the way the Games Workshop actually wants it treated. I think that's just some writer's interpretation, but it has been done. I think personally it's just them sneaking it in before Games Workshop noticed. And it's sometimes the older writers who did that who probably had less leeway, because that's the only way I can explain the book Inquisitor. And if I have to explain that, I will legitimately want to quit YouTube because I don't want to do that again.
power of an entire species' souls, they turned their new robotic slaves on the old ones and hunted them to extinction. The necrons here, now the soulless, undying necrons, got their wish at the price of their souls.
Sort of is a very important thing here, because hunting them to extinction is maybe true. You're really not sure what goes on at this point. We know that there was a war. We know the old ones raised up the orcs at that time, who were honorable, sophisticated military geniuses who were giant, like knight-sized individuals. And there was the Eldar, who were freaking psychic Jedi, essentially, but with like all the superpowers of the fan fiction versions that could just do everything. They were all an entire race of Mary Sues who may or may not have lost. Yeah, so that's a little more complicated. But it's also one of those things where the information that we do have is sus, as in explicitly in lore suspicious, because everyone who knows it is either dead, lying, Chaos Gods, or has their memories, which they believe are accurate, very fucked up over age, the Necron tier. So what actually went down is actually in question, including if the old ones actually died. Not entirely clear on that.
But we can count the number of kind gods on an amputated hand.
Did that say Rogel Dorn? Rogel Dorn, model leak. The worst part is, if there was just a Rogel Dorn statue that they were selling as a bit of lore and or terrain, there's probably a lot of people who'd buy, because technically it would be getting Dorn back. That's adornable. Yes, I'm making the joke right now. I can't help it. I'm going to do it anyways.
With time, the selfish star gods turned on each other, fighting one another for more chances at
one correction there. Well, that is exactly true. Everything he said, it explicitly happened because the deceiver fucked around. You're going to see a theme here.
Glory and power. With this, the leader of the Necrons, Zarek, the Silent King, the man who doomed his species when he accepted this deal, waited, planned, bide his time until he seized the perfect moment and turned his legions of undead citizens against the star gods. Gods cannot be killed, but they can be broken. So Zarek broke the star gods into thousands of pieces and locked them away in vaults, taking their free will away as they did to them, and sealed them away as basically Pokemon to be used as weapons in the future.
Oh god, that is actually completely accurate. They even have the energy effect when they're being released. 40k is space Pokemon if you're playing the Necrons. I have the most horrible and terrible urge to play a Necron army painted as Team Rocket. I can't paint that, mostly because freehanded for the R's is well beyond my skill level. But I want to do it now. Oh, I kind of hate and love the idea.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's the Void Dragon.
Zarek
Yeah.
then, with his perfect memory, exiled himself for his sins, flying out to the darkness between galaxies to atone for what he had done.
Yeah, that
This
didn't last long.
entire situation,
Technically it did.
the genocide of the Old Ones and the rebellion of Zarek, will go down in history as the War in Heaven. It is the most brutal war the galaxy has ever seen and ever will see. This was a conflict that took an entire galaxy-spanning species and pitted them against gods that ate stars. The Necrons.
That also is one of those things that is a tagline for the War in Heaven. The worst galaxy the galaxy would ever see. I know I misspoke there, but also at the same time I said something completely accurate. Is the worst galaxy that the galaxy ever is going to see, because it's the only galaxy. But what I meant to say is the war, of course. And that is maybe true. It is probably true that this, when the Necrons were at the height of their power, when the unrestrained shards were, well, not shards, but full Catan, and it was against all of the crazes the old ones can bring up, against the Aeldari, against the Crorks. All of that might have been the biggest. I say might because we don't know what happened in a lot of other time periods where fighting did happen, including before the War in Heaven, because it is hinted at that there was a fight prior to that, but only hinted. You're going to get a lot that this time period he's talking about right now has almost no history associated with it. He's covering most of the known information right now, and even that is so little. In a 30-year franchise, he's covering a majority of information. Should tell you all you need to know about how little there is.
Rather crippled from, the War in Heaven, decide to go to sleep in gigantic tomb worlds on various planets.
Although that is also in debate. That is one of the options that was put forward. And like many things in 40K, there are multiple options of why something happened. And Games Workshop does that intentionally because they're fucking assholes, is how I'm going to put it. The way they do it is they give some narrative freedom to make it fit your setting. And also because they're not entirely sure themselves how they want to approach it. They're just going to say, it's the warp. Multiple things could have happened because fuck time, fuck space. It can be whatever the fuck we want. Is actually a completely in-universe, logistically sound way to look at it, because that's actually how the warp can function if you get to a high enough mastery of it. Time, space, it's kind of a suggestion at that point, including history. History is whatever you want it to be, so there could actually be multiple ones coinciding because someone decided to merge timelines or have them overlap and interact without even knowing it, because that can happen and has.
Until the upstart species of the galaxy died out. And so turns out, when you have a war that lasts tens, hundreds of thousands of years, and it involves the genociding of multiple species, the old ones of the galaxy, and the consumption of souls from an entire race, the warp gets a little wacky.
Sort of. It's mostly this time period that fucked it up, but also there's other things that started to happen. There's other entities in the warp, not the chaos gods yet, but things that had been in there that started eating people. Not demons, but I think they're enslavers is what they're called. There's very little information about them. There's more about them than the War in Heaven, but how anything happened in this area, hell, there's even a few theories that they were the reason the War in Heaven ended. And I don't know how that one worked out, because they don't seem that powerful, but who knows? It's old. Who knows what happened?
From an entire race, the warp gets a little wacky.
Yeah.
If you had a kiddie pool and it was nice and calm, Korn is over there splashing about, so you don't really go in that direction. Nurgle has explosive diarrhea, so you don't really go in that direction either. But you can still kind of get in the pool.
Although at this point, even though he's saying there's 3 chaos gods, technically that's only one of the theories that they even existed at this point. Because part of their creation theory is that the old ones created them as weapons in this war he's talking about. Is that true? Nobody knows. Hints kind of lead to it. Sometimes there's hints that they already existed. There are hints that they didn't exist already. It's really fucking confusing, because certainty is never something Games Workshop offers, even in their direct witnessed testimony from eyewitness saying exactly what they see in writing, in novels. They sometimes then pull a fast one's like, oh yeah, that was wrong. And they just leave it at that. And it's annoying.
Pool still fine. Turns out when you add a couple trillion souls to that kiddie pool, it'll make the waves a little more turbulent.
Just dropped a few
turns out
meteorites
a
in
lot
it.
of them like to pick a side, Nurgle, Tzeentch, or Khorne. So the once calmer warp, the once relaxing kiddie pool has now been bloated. A million years of war will certainly make Khorne, god of murder and slaughter, more powerful. A million years of war will probably make Tzeentch, god of deception and change, a little more powerful.
Ironically, the war for Khorne is probably the biggest factor there because canonically, Khorne is the most powerful because there is only war. But also because everyone else is more sneaky than anything else, so...
And good God, a million years of war will make Nurgle, god of decay, oh, just the tiniest bit more powerful. Now, entering that kiddie pool is no longer fun, it's dangerous. The warp is now a problem. Hell is resembling hell a lot closer to what we imagined it originally. The Sea of Souls and the Realm of Chaos are now intertwined.
Okay,
so
now
who
he's
else
moving to that
brave
point.
the galaxy than a species that won't need to deal with that?
This is one of those things where it's kind of weird. We know the Eldar did exist in the War in Heaven. That's why they were created. They were artificially made into the way they are now, explicitly as psychic weapons. But anything else beyond that is kind of up in the air. The gods came around for their side specifically at this point. They may not have been weapons. There's a lot of questions, honestly, at this point. And GW is not answering any of them, explicitly making a point not to. So they were already here at this point, even though Bricky's kind of giving the idea that they were getting here now. I mean, they took over at this point, but they were already there. They were fighting in this. They were soldiers in this. It's kind of weird he's not bringing it up, although I guess at that point it's just way too much detail to really go into. Enter the Eldar.
The Eldar are space elves. They have a
Also, they changed it from Eldar to Aeldar because words were not distinct enough to protect copyright. So GW changed a lot of things. Yeah, it's Aeldari now because Space Elf was definitely not copyrightable. Eldar is close enough to Eldar that they didn't really give that one. So even though it is, they like the fancier words that GW can explicitly copyright because they lost lawsuits against people for using similar names. That's the explicit reason why names changed.
a lot of the traits that you probably think of when you think of elves: tall, slender, pointy ears, bit more androgynous looking, no matter what DeviantArt will tell you, and a bit stronger on the
Oh my.
emotional side. The old ones, as I mentioned, could create life, and when they were
Oh, he is
getting,
bringing this part up, okay.
absolutely bodied by the Catan and the Necrons,
Yeah.
they made some new races to try to help them. One of them was the Eldar. It didn't save them, but they're here now anyway. Oh, and also the Orcs, but they're busy right now.
What? Wait, is this an actual game? I have no idea what this is. This is an animation or a game?
Particularly psychically powerful race. So they were really adept at being able to handle the new turbulent warp of chaos and good at killing Necrons, hence why they went to sleep. Being psychically gifted is basically like being a wizard, but you get your wizard powers from hell. This is called being a psyker. And basically, if you want to do cool wizard shit like lightning from your hands or reading someone's mind, you can do that, but you siphon the energy to do that from the warp. Luckily, the Eldar are very good at handling this without too many negative effects.
I know he's going to bring it up, but the way he phrased that is the most ironic way possible, and I love it for that one reason alone.
Because, you know, summoning power from the Sea of Souls with the new Chaos Friends can be a bit of an issue. But Eldar are pretty good at it. And you see, what's really cool and also awful about Warhammer is that most developed species travel long, faster than light distances by going through that warp. They create a tear in reality to unreality and move through it. Faster than light.
I mean, technically what he's talking about right now is not entirely accurate because they've changed their own reasoning for how Fast and Light in Star Wars works, but that's completely beside the point. Also, just a random aside, there are species in 40k that don't use the warp to travel. One is the Tyranids, and they do it by literally saying, hey, gravity powers, bitch. Literally, that's actually how they travel. It's much slower, but also it's kind of terrifying when you think about it.
Light travel? Cringe. We go through hell itself to deliver your packages. For those of you who play Minecraft, you know how the nether is like a pocket dimension? So moving 10 spaces in the nether is actually moving something like 1,000 in the real world. That's basically what warp travel is.
Is that how it works? I haven't played Minecraft.
Nether, there are a lot of things that want to kill you. The Aeldari found a way to do so in between realities. Not regular reality, not the warp, something else. A purgatory of sorts, a fabricated psychic realm that allowed them to travel without fearing the negative effects of the warp. The Aeldari were the perfect fit for the new galaxy, and they took it with open arms and pointy ears. The empire of the Aeldari spread everywhere, and it spread all the way until now, the 21st century. That's right, while you were watching NPC streams on TikTok, the space elves were ruling.
You know, I was actually able to forget about those NPC streams. Why'd you have to bring it up? Those things are just so cringy.
The galaxy, and they did so for quite a long period of time.
Maybe. The maybe there is really important because technically what he's about to talk about, the rise of humanity, happened before. So this is one of those times where I honestly admit the reasoning is probably that the initial writers didn't know what they were doing and conflicted with themselves, and they just wrote things down and then didn't ask, hey, technically, we just said 2 different races have complete control of the galaxy at the same time. That is never addressed. It is technically how the lore is represented. So, yeah, there's going to be inconsistencies. It's kind of fucked up.
We know how to be friends. The 21st century came and went. Humanity grew and grew all under the nose of their elf overlords. At this time, humans advanced, your classic sci-fi style way. We began to expand, colonize our solar system, terraformed our planets, and created Mars, new and more powerful machines and starships. The age of Terra, also known as Earth, but we call it Terra here, was here, and existed between the 21st century all the way until the 15th millennia. Not much is known about this time, not much needs to be known. Humanity grew up, sought the stars. It's classic. Then,
sort of. There is a lot of speculation that things did happen there that were more impressive, unless he's about to get to them now.
Came the years between 15,000 and 25,000, the age of technology, or to some, the dark age of technology. This
is what I was looking for him to get into. Honestly, though, I would love if we saw something from the age of humanity prior to technology's age, just because that's the most empathetic version of humanity the 40K has. And he would explain so many questions about how they'd probably have to dodge around elves because they're there. Maybe. We don't know. They could have just retreated the webway. No one saw them. I don't know. No one does. But it's an entire time period where shit was going down and things happened, but we also don't know why or where.
This is when humanity reached a new apex of technological understanding. When you think of sci-fi, there's a lot of things you can think of. Star Trek, maybe Star Wars style. You can go cyberpunk dystopian. The age of technology was deep sci-fi, like a scientific prowess that fringed on magic. This is also when the first ever psychers began showing up in humanity.
Maybe. That last part is a very hard maybe, because there's some thought that psychers had actually been with humanity already. Perpetuals, for example, a lot of them were psychers, like the Emperor later on. Psyker, perpetual. Heavily hinted to be Roman emperors and maybe, you know, maybe a guy from Macedonia who conquered a bunch of territory. Maybe, maybe not. They give hints. Could be Jesus. Could be Zeus. Could be both. Definitely probably Odin because he likes to use that ideology a lot. But there's a lot of crazy stuff about that. And there were psychers in the past. Maybe. Because the backstory for all of them, if any of that is true, is heavily debated. And they've explicitly said the memories of the people who are old enough to say they were there are intentionally broken or just broken from age. So, yeah. Maybe is a very important word to remember.
Individuals with the genetic mutation to be able to access the warp, and then because of that, travel through it. Humanity was no longer constricted to their early ways of travel. With warp travel, they could go anywhere in the galaxy. They equipped ships with gigantic AI machines, with everything you would ever need to know about mankind, and sent them out on colony ships to expand their influence across the galaxy.
Yep.
And this was truly the golden age of humanity. And with every golden age, there is a fall. While the new...
God damn you, Bricky. You just had to bring that one up. It could be worse. He could have used the 3D CGI version. That would have hurt worse.
Human upstarts of the galaxy were reaching new levels of technology and prowess. The Eldar were engaging in
Debauchery!
debauchery! Debauchery! What
Yeah,
happens
basically.
when a species has everything? You can produce unlimited food out of nothing. Your need for farmers and workers, gone. You have dominated the stars and have created a fast travel system that doesn't rely on the dangers of the warp. You have nothing else to do. You have no struggles, no problems, and feel as if there is nowhere else to go. Well, you begin to experiment. The Eldar started harmless enough. You know, you take a serious interest in your species' culture, your arts, paintings, poems, plays. These are Eldar, elves, remember? Their emotions are heightened, more powerful than us humans. So your plays get louder. They start to push on the limits of your hearing ability. Your music becomes different, more deranged. It pushes the boundaries of what is art. The visual spectacle of art becomes more bizarre, more delusional, more eccentric. And let's not forget a very important sense. Touch. Pornography is one thing.
Now, I paused at a really weird point right now. Just one thing I want to point out that does explain a lot of what he's talking about and what he's going to talk about. The Eldar at this time period could fix a lot of issues with their soul, such as not being eaten when they died. So they could take their soul and shove it into a new body. Yeah, how that was done in practice, and if there were actually new Eldar being born, or they were just babies with old souls getting a fresh set of legs, is kind of creepy when you think about it. Not sure that's the way it went or not, and I don't want to find out. Because with how things went, the most disturbing possible way to treat that is exactly how it definitely would have happened.
Sense. Touch. Pornography is one thing. Brothels is another. What if they all mixed? What if your brothels were part of your art and music? And what if those became more deranged? The boundaries of debauchery were not just met,
like wearing
but
the skin
shattered.
there.
Next thing you know, murder is commonplace and often mixed with the art, music, and sex. Pain.
It actually makes a lot more sense when you realize murder was something you can get better from. Yeah, you're dead now, but in like a year, you'll be back. New body. It'll be even healthier. What's the problem? When you look at it that way, it does make a lot more sense because he didn't mention that part, but it is very important to the psychology of there's literally no downside here. What could possibly go wrong? There are no consequences, no matter how bad it could possibly get. Nothing could hurt us. We could literally slaughter everyone and they'll just get back up tomorrow and do it again. Yeah, that's actually the thought process right now. As you could probably assume, it didn't go well.
Pain is a common byproduct of entertainment. Whatever sensation you can have must be increased, must be enhanced, must be taken to the limits. The Eldar Empire slipped into a nightmarish realm of debauchery and excess, with the worst of it taking place in a city in the Webway, a black...
This part is the old understanding, and it might still be accurate, but this is one of those details that's kind of in question because some writers, some people, some lore does kind of contradict it. Some say Camorra is the debauchery capital of the old Eldar. Others say that it was not actually that important. It was just an outpost that happened to be there. Others say that it was an important outpost and a place where they did congregate, but there was other shit everywhere else. It's complicated and not going to be clarified.
market for these kinds of heinous acts known as Kamara. Some Eldar saw the writing on the wall, saw what was happening to their species and how far they had slipped. So they boarded continent-sized starships called craft worlds and left their empire, seeking.
Also, when he says continent, he doesn't mean something small like Australia. He means Pangea. So, yeah, there's some really big ones. There's also not many, admittedly, so it's impressive, but less so when you realize, oh, there's not many at all by comparison to all the worlds anyone else in the Materium has.
A more enlightened, calmer existence among their peers. Some, those in Kamara, pushed it to even greater heights, relishing the pain and torment they inflicted on those around them. All during this, the warp, the yin to the yang of the world, was fed by these emotions, by the psychic power of the Eldar, by the.
Specifically, I should point out that the reason this actually worked is not just that it was the emotions and the psychic power, it's that Eldar souls have more emotion, more intense emotion. Factors of 10s to 1,000 is a range that people throw out randomly. No one knows the exact amount, of course, because that would be a hard detail in 40K, which does not happen. So between that and the psychic power drawn from those emotions, it's not so much souls being put in, it's giant bonfires thrown into a small pond in a very placid area that's already kind of fucked up, but then they decide just to start shitting in the water. Yeah, you don't want to go further with that metaphor, but it is literally exactly how this happened.
The souls take him in these depraved acts on a galactic scale. And just like that, Eldar ended. Slaanesh, the fourth chaos god, was birthed into existence and consumed the souls of 90% of the Eldar population. Those that fled were spared the worst of it, and those in the Webway and Kamara were able to stave off the pull of Slaanesh so long as they continued to commit horrid acts of torture and violence.
Which for them, some of them, maybe early on, was like, wait, so we have to be monsters even more than we are already? The rest were like, so to survive, we need to do exactly what we're already doing? Nice.
For the majority of the Eldar, their empire died with Slaanesh's birth. The new fourth chaos god, she who thirsts, the god of unspeakable excess of pleasure, pain, hedonism, and perfection, had been born. With the fall of the Eldar Empire came the ruin of humanity. Slaanesh's birth sent storms in the warp across the galaxy, making travel between star systems impossible.
Maybe. This is the common way to talk about this. And what he's probably about to talk about is the machine revolt. Most of the time, it's machine revolt ended, humanity recovers a little, and then Slaanesh's birth fucks everything up. Maybe. There's also a few takes where that timeline isn't exactly like that, where it's the machine revolt happens on humanity's side, everything's getting fucked up, warp breaks because Slaanesh is born, shit dies. And then all the dark times go away and people just basically can't get around. This is one of those times where I personally think the first one is more accurate, but the second one is floated around every now and again as a possible way to explain how things happened. It's confusing. 40K intentionally does that, and it's not going to get better.
Coupled with a huge classic AI rebellion, as a staple in these sci-fi settings,
also, to give an idea of what that stable sci-fi setting rebellion is, the average weapon at that time that still existed without anyone realizing, except maybe the Emperor, in some of the ships that survived to the 40K timeline is a simple weapon where they shoot something, they make a copy of it in the past or the future, overlap it with the current copy, and then they literally annihilate in every single atom of the ships overlapping in an out-of-phase time period so that it's literally a fusion for every single atom in this ship. Admittedly, fusion is supposed to be a cool process, not a hot process like fission. But this is sci-fi for a bunch of people who don't actually know much about hard sci-fi because they're in such a really fucked up level of magic sci-fi. So we're going to ignore that and say it explodes. Battletech logic on that one. But yeah, time travel as a weapon to cause explosions of nuclear proportions, or just turning off stars. Also, I'd like to point out, not the most powerful forces that exist in the universe. That would still be the Necron because they have some bullshit stings.
Humanity began to suffer the age of strife. Now, planets that relied on intergalactic travel were completely cut off. Long-range messages normally sent through the warp were snuffed out. If you were a planet that was great at mining stuff but couldn't get food, well,
you starve.
You know that movie about the rugby players in the mountains? Oh, and because of these insane warp storms and fluctuations, psychers began to appear among the human population a bit more often. Now, this initially had them hunted down as witches, because that's pretty common in this setting, but some deemed it right to protect them. Unfortunately for those people, psychers, because they open a gateway to the warp, don't really know how to use their powers well, and they kind of attract demons, who then force their way through the psyker as a conduit of sorts and begin to slaughter the population of your planet.
Yeah. Although there were a few planets that did come up that didn't do that. And they were almost all completely killed off in the Crusades, and only footnotes occasionally mentioned. So, yeah.
The Age of Strife was a catastrophic period of time for humanity and set back their progress tenfold over the not one, not two, but 5,000 year period.
that's how long it
During
lasted?
this time,
I actually
the
wasn't sure how
age of
long.
humanity that we know began to form. Worlds equipped with large mechs for agriculture began to equip them with weapons to defend from alien and demonic invaders. Over 5,000 years, this became a custom and tradition, dubbing them as night worlds, a feudal society of honor-bound knights in gigantic robots that uphold the chivalric code to defend their worlds and honor. A group of
And with that came the exact type of people who like to talk about chivalry. The ones at the top who could just say, well, you should listen to me because honor, and also because I have a giant war machine that can literally step on you. Some are pretty good. Many are exactly the kind of joke of a feudal system you exactly expect from a dark comedy that is 40K.
Of individuals on Mars, after radioactively bombing their planet
comedy.
to become inhospitable to
More like
human
a black
life,
comedy.
ran their entire lives underground on the few life support systems keeping them alive. Those technicians who could work on the machines and keep them operational were revered, and over 5,000 years went from skilled members of society to full-blown priests.
And the important thing here, and he probably won't get to this because it's kind of tangential, but I think it's absolutely fascinating. That time period of the people being revered who had the information does lead into the Mechanicums and Mechanicus idea that information is more important than the body because the body will fade. They're in a nuclear wasteland where the body's dying and information is being lost. And as information's lost, it gets harder to survive. So it makes perfect sense why they go to extremes, body horror levels of extremes, to keep information alive because of 5,000 years of the information is keeping us alive. It is more important than the body. So if we fuck around with the body to keep the information alive, it's better. That's how this entire sociology sociology of this system exists. And it's kind of fascinating that it is probably one of the most realistic aspects of 40K, is one of the most fantastical, disturbing aspects. But it actually works on a more sci-fi setting than anything else without any of the magic thrown in. I just kind of like that. Don't want to play the faction because the models are so fiddly. You look at one too intently and it just snaps. But they look amazing.
The cult Mechanicus, or tech priests of Mars, formed in the ashes of the Red Planet with a religious fervor and doctrine on the cult of the machine god. And on Earth, or Terra, techno-barbarian tribes waged war across the planet in a Mad Max style of blood and gore, until finally, a mysterious man who lived in the shadows of Terra for millennia finally revealed himself to the populace. His name was the Emperor. He deemed
that is, it's fine, but because I'm, geeking out over every little detail, I'm going to do it anyways. He is called the Emperor. His title is the Emperor. His name is explicitly unknown. There is an entire, spoilers, section of the current lore being written now to discover his name because they're doing the old-fashioned names have power over people thing. So a big, long, complicated name is actually a defensive mechanism. And also unpronounceable sounds. That's also a defensive mechanism. He is old. That might not be the case, and no one knows what he is, and he goes out of his way to explicitly only use titles and will make up things like revelation when he's talking to random people for the most ironic impact possible. So just throwing it out there, name is very intentionally wrong, but also that this is also intentionally wronged so that people think it's his name because they want the wrong information to be thought of as right because it makes it easier to hide the real information, is what the current lore is heading at. But also Games Workshop just didn't really know what they were doing initially and kind of just went Mad Max figure Conan the Barbarian in the future, and they didn't have the rights, so they didn't think they would get it. Yeah, there was a lot of really fucked up copyright issues they just stole from blatantly, which is also ironic that StarCraft was based on 40K as initially a prequel, but then Games Workshop turned down the entire project and just made its own thing. Yeah, that's real.
Himself the Emperor of Mankind. Where did he come from? I don't know.
Someplace.
Why is he 10 feet tall and the most powerful psyker of all of
That actually is known. 10 feet tall is explicitly because he shapeshifts. The few times anyone sees what he might really look like, it's just what they think he might look like. So even the people who think they might see the best of him see a figure who is covered in a cloak and they don't really know what he looks like as the most true way to know what he looks like. When I don't know is the best way to guess what he looks like, that gives you an idea. He ain't 10 feet tall. What we see here is as real as anything else, as in every image in canon is fan fiction of him. And that's intentional. And that's one of the more fascinating things about his character.
Mankind? I don't know. Why is he basically immortal? I don't know.
I mean, actually, that one's known. He is an immortal. Just that, yeah. Perpetuals. They just exist perpetually. It's a thing. There's multiple. How that came about, if that was intentionally or not, if they existed before all of the space shit happened, don't know. But there's actually an explanation for that, which is one of the very few times. It's a horrible explanation that needs way more detail, but even something is weird for GW, for 40K to have. So I'm pointing it out right now because it is very unique.
Where'd Cotton Eye Joe go? Who knows? But he's here, and he isn't happy with all of you ripping up Terra. So he began the Unification Wars.
By ripping up
where
Terra.
He and a very early version of the famous Space Marines, the Thunder Warriors, reunited Terra under a single banner.
Technically. Also, the Thunder Warriors are funny because they're basically just rage fuel super-powered Space Marines, but also way stronger and still died a lot, which does lead to a lot of the people thinking that whatever was going on Earth was way more powerful than it had any right to be.
With blood. Then, after taking over Earth, he reunited the Thunder Warriors into the fucking dirt. This is where we get the Imperium
that is perfectly accurate.
Also known as the Imperium. The new faction headed by the Emperor of Mankind with a treaty signed with the Cult Mechanicus on Mars to spread out and reunite humanity after the catastrophic Age of Strife. But first...
Funny thing about that, normally what's about to happen is follow me or die. Here, though, because of logistics, follow me, and also, you have all the good machines still? I am your god. Yes, follow me. Is actually how that went down. And it's kind of hilarious for it.
The Emperor is going to need some smaller versions of himself. 20 of them. 18 of them, I meant.
I mean, it's still wrong. Because there's 21. He's definitely going to get to that because they have the double picture down here. And, they don't actually have the two primarchs who were knocked out here. That's disappointing.
Crafted sons of the strongest human to ever live. All of them possess unparalleled strategic power, intelligence, formidable strength and size.
And Perturabo.
Real powerful force to unite humanity and stop the chaos of the current galaxy. Speaking of chaos, you ever seen that image of that guy? It's like throwing the baby like a basketball. It's about what happened. The Chaos Gods intervened and grabbed the 18 Primarch gestation pods and yeeted them across the galaxy at a whim, everywhere they could possibly go. A galactic game of keep away. So the Emperor had to get them back. So
yes-ish. Everything he just said is the most standard way to look at this lore. But there's also so much more that has come out within the last 10 years that may or may not be true, even harder than what he just said. So for an introduction, that's the best way to go. For more information, oh boy, that is a rabbit hole. One is some time travel shenanigans happen with invading force in the future who came back and then did a self-fulfilling prophecy. But that's possibly, but also a dream, but it could have been an illusion, but it could have actually happened. Could have been both for all we know, because metaphors and dreams could actually be real in the warp. But then there's also their mother came in, and yes, that is a thing based on genetic copy, not actually giving birth to them, who was in there who decided, I don't like you. Bad emperor. No, don't trust you. Throw the kids out. And that might be true, but also it might have been planned. So it could have been the warp doing that the entire time. And maybe it wasn't true and she was doing a deal, but she wasn't. But it could be planned, but it could be her playing into it and just doing that to fuck over the emperor. But it could also have been part of the emperor's plan, but maybe it wasn't. And nobody knows, because this is really fucking confusing. If it seems like that's a lot, yeah. And it actually is fascinating. Pisses a lot of people off. But it's not one of the worst written segments of the lore, so I kind of just go, yeah, it's cool enough, I'm fine with it. Because there's a lot of other things they've done that were just Inquisitor. It was Inquisitor. If you don't know, don't find out. Just take my word for it and avoid that book like the plague. You will not thank me, because if you find out, you will have known too much, and I am so sorry.
So begins the Great Crusade, a crusade across the stars to reunite not just humanity, but the Emperor with his fallen sons.
Is that
the first to be
Nintendo
found
in the background?
was Horus.
How long ago did this come out? 2 months. Okay, so he's intentionally going with the canon lore here rather than the expanded lore. I'm going to just geek out right now, because what he's saying is the official in-universe lore. Horus was found first, and he was the favorite because they spent the most time together. That is what most people know. That is what in-universe is said to be real. What has come out in a few books is that's not the case at all. There was a Primarch found on Earth before anyone else, and he stayed in the shadows because he was a sneaky bitch. Yeah, that's basically the change. But he was also aware of everything and may or may not have turned traitor and may or may not be chaos right now and may or may not be alive. He's probably alive, but he also might be dead. And no one really knows, because fuck the Alpha Legion. Omegon was an asshole. Even if he's an honest asshole who didn't go traitor, no one can tell. It really doesn't matter.
One of the
he actually mentioned it. He actually mentioned it. Yeah, he knows. Yeah, the Alpha Legion, Omegon. And I'm pretty sure that's actually the picture of Alfarius, though.
One of the strongest and most noble
So
sons,
he was aware of
the
that change.
Emperor
Nice.
carried with him a legion of newly crafted warriors with genetic material made from their Primarch father.
And definitely not from the Thunder Warriors, because they didn't devolve into giant monstrosities of cancer and rage that had no understanding and had breaking down like dementia. Yeah, they're a little weaker, but also they don't die unless they're killed. So functionally immortal as opposed to actually immortal like a perpetual. It's almost like the guy in charge knew what he was doing with the entire immortality thing. Nah.
These are the newly made Space Marines. For Horus, his were the Luna Wolves. And as the Emperor continued
The head
on
drill
his
still looks
great
stupid.
crusade,
Some people
he
like it, I
found
don't.
more and more of his sons, reuniting them with their individual Space Marine legions. Leman Russ, the cunning hunter with the Space Wolves. Rogel Dorm, the Phalanx with the Imperial Fists.
art looks
Angron,
good.
the Barbarian.
The one who probably should have been put down as an act of mercy. Let's be honest, he probably explicitly wanted that. He was actively suicidal. He hated people for not letting him die. That is very much the case. I mean, there is some hints that he was so corrupted at this point. He was just like, you know what? I need you. Just go do your thing. You're going to trade her anyways. If there was someone that really was never in question, it's this guy. Poor bastard, because he never had a chance. Pain nails were stuck in his head when he was so young he couldn't fight back. And never got better. Apparently he also had massive empathy, but when all he felt was pain and rage from everyone around him, it's like his own pain magnified. But that's also not entirely important and may or may not be true, because that's most GW lore in general. Some franchises, you have to wonder, okay, this is canon and this is all the fan fiction. Then there's GW, where you can't tell the difference because actual canon is contradictory intentionally. If it sounds like I missed about that, you're accurate.
The very angry with his world eaters. Fulgrim, the perfect, with his emperor's children. And Jagatai Khan, the swift, the stoic, and his white scars.
If it wasn't for the fact their army had the absolute worst color to paint, because there is no good white paint. You got to go like a gray, then maybe like a different shade of gray that has a little more color. So it's not actually white, but only looks white if there's a lot of darker colors around it to make it seem like white by comparison. You just can't do that fucking color. It's nearly impossible. Oh, dear God, it's like it's designed to make that the least playable army, because you have to be a master painter to get something that doesn't look like an absolute freaking ruin. I'm not even projecting on that one. It's legitimately a horrible paint. Oh. Yeah. Also, when you get to his lore, he's actually really cool and has a lot of cool issues and was the most free thinking of all the primarchs. And just, I wish his lore had more, and I wish his army wasn't that color, because, dear God, if someone could make a white paint that didn't look like shit, it would be so easy. It's like yellow is even slightly better, but not by a lot. But white is nearly impossible.
Those were just some of the 18, and one by one his lost Primarch
Vulcan,
sons were returned to him, and their Space Marine legions returned to them.
That guy.
The Great Crusade saw humanity once again
reconquer
the stars, returning worlds of humanity back to the Imperium and killing any and all who stood against their noble crusade.
Speaking of people who should have been killed by standing against the crusade, this guy. Fucking Lorgar.
But in the years of the 31st millennia, treachery would break this all apart. Men, we don't know what we did. Horus, the Emperor's most beloved and favored sons.
Okay, I know Horus. Is this another version of Horus? I don't recognize the art. Yeah, it is. It's Horus with hair. Oh. I guess this must be after the triumph of Volinor. He decided to grow his hair out. Oh, that is weird.
Named War Master for the Crusade, succumbed to the power of chaos and daddy issues. All because of that bastard Erebus. Yo, fuck Erebus. Slowly, Horus would become...
Yeah, also, Erebus is... I'm going to say something very controversial. He is a great character because he is the person that you can bring up, and all of the evil demon primarchs, all of the monsters, all of the actual beings of literal evil and nothing else, Erebus is still the one whose writing makes him an arrogant piece of shit who's just good enough that he can fuck over anyone, get out of the situation, maybe not unscathed, but you always want to see him fail, but you love seeing him fail to the point where you kind of want him in the story so you can see him fail. He's that really well-written villain that you love to hate. So here's the controversial part. Erebus is a good character. I said it. I'm standing by it. But saying nice things about him does feel wrong.
Corrupted, turning the Emperor's sons against him. This begins the most pivotal moment in our story, and the one that has like 50 books written about it.
Oh,
the Horus heresy. 9 of the 18 Primarchs turned against the Emperor, and the following years were a
I really wish we put an Alpha Legion joke in here right now, because did they turn against the Emperor? We don't know. We literally don't. It seems like they turned against him, and they probably turned against him, but they might have also not. But they might have also just betrayed the Emperor, but not Earth, and they might have just betrayed humanity, but they might have betrayed everyone. Maybe they are playing a game we don't even know, and they're planning for something in the future. Or they're all dead, and those plans don't matter. Nobody knows. That's the Alpha Legion. They literally are anything. Also, if you just have a random group of things that are just all different colors, say it's the Alpha Legion, and technically, in lore, that is a perfectly accurate reason and completely good reason. Why? Well, they're hiding as everyone else. They just got pulled together randomly. I don't just have a random mishmash of characters you don't match. It's the Alpha Legion. They're all the correct color. It's funny because that actually does work.
Bloody battle for the throne of Terra. The Emperor originally was working on a special webway project, just like the Eldar, to make faster than light travel significantly easier and safer. Really improve humanity to allow them to conquer the stars without the risk of the warp. Well, this big red idiot named Magnus kind of blew a hole into that, literally and figuratively.
He didn't even mean
Biggie
to.
over there is stuck on a gigantic golden throne, holding back the oncoming rush of demons and powering the Astronomicon. Basically a big North Star for people who are...
It's a big North Star now and it was before, but he could have previously power it from far away. Admittedly, the sunk cost fallacy is what you would normally think of here, but there's a lot of hinting that the writers currently at GW realized, oh yeah, we have a sunk cost fallacy going on where they're just keeping it alive. But they could have just put someone on there and then sacrificed them and got Biggie off, survived all that, and just built another one or did something else because Biggie was brilliant enough that it was fine. Maybe. There's a lot of lore hinting at there's a lot more going on than just a lighthouse. But that has been touched on, although it might be in maybe an edition or two, depending on if the Tyranids ever reach Earth.
Sailing in the warp to help them navigate. The Horus heresy saw many loyalist and traitor legions pitted against each other in a bloody war until it reached Terra itself. Horus, unable to break through the lines and with time running out, made a gambit and opened his ship up to be boarded. The Emperor took this challenge, quickly allowing someone else to take control of the throne as he teleported his way onto Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. The Emperor, unable to truly kill his most beloved son, changed his mind right quick when Horus strangled the life out of his other son, Sanguinius.
Ignore the fact that he looks like a vampire. That is completely coincidental. Also, even though that is legitimately what they are, the Blood Angels are explicitly good space vampires. Yeah. Also, ignore this part right now just because... Did this actually happen? Don't know. Because the books, the Horus Heresy series, which he previously mentioned, they're getting to this. They are maybe a book or two away from this happening, if not in the very next book. Maybe. I have no idea how long this is going to go, and I think they've already pushed back how far the series is going to go already. So saying it's going to end soon and actually ending soon are very different things. So this is the common understanding of what happened, but it doesn't look like that's going to be what actually happened. Or, as is very important, it's not what happened in this instance, because previous comments about timey-wimey, spacey, wacy bullshit overlapping and just everything you want to be possible can be possible, so it doesn't really matter. But also it really does. That's still accurate.
Oh, no!
I'm sure you've seen this image at some point. The Emperor then said, "I'm not gonna sugarcoat it," and proceeded to psychically blast Horus into complete oblivion, killing...
Yes, because... the Emperor had all of the love for his sons at this point to not immediately kill Horus. The reason I'm sounding sarcastic about that is spoilers for anyone who hasn't read things yet, or if you don't care, this is fine, stick around. Latest book, Emperor cut out the piece of his soul that cared. All the fucks, ooh, shouldn't hit the mic. He just got rid of all the fucks, threw them away. So the entire canon reason of why he didn't immediately just atomize Horus was because he didn't want to kill his son. That part about him that didn't, gone. So this fight is explicitly not canon now, but also intentionally in-universe canon, which is a really fun way to look at it, finding out that the world that we know isn't accurate. How? Well, we're going to find out. But I'm really actually excited for that conclusion. It's legitimately exciting for me.
Not only his body, but also his soul.
Yep.
Horribly wounded from this
shattered
duel,
it even.
the Emperor is returned to the Golden Throne in order to keep the demons at bay and power the Astronomicon, because without it, humanity would be flying blind. There he sits, slowly dying from his wounds and the strain of powering the Golden Throne. The only thing keeping him alive is feeding upon the souls of 1,000 psychers every single day.
And that number did increase to 10,000 later. Although, to give an idea of just what kind of horrible nature this is. There are so many planets in the Imperium at this time period that 1,000 a day is actually a completely manageable number and not even that many. It sounds like a lot, and when it was made, it was this obscenely huge number. To give a little idea of what that's like, 3,000 people died every day to COVID. So those numbers are sustainable on Earth. Horrible, unconscionable. But when you talk about there are so many planets that there might be planets that never, ever send someone, that is actually a huge amount. It's a tiny drop in the bucket of the population of the Imperium. It's uncountably large because it does cover the majority of the galaxy. And when hive cities have more population than the Earth right now, having the 10s, 20s, 30s, or sometimes hundreds of billions, I don't know if it actually gets to the hundreds, but under hives, man. When you get into warp shenanigans and some of the bullshit going on, there's probably folded space in there. I wouldn't be surprised if that isn't the case. I think it does stop at 10s to 20s. I don't think they ever hit 3 digits. But I could be wrong on Ecumenopolises.
This was 10,000 years ago. We are now in the 40.
Time is all broken and no one actually knows the date. That's funny because it internally justifies a retcon.
First millennium, modern day. Warhammer 40,000.
Technically, it may be 41 or 42,000.
The Emperor remains on his throne.
That is the weirdest depiction of the Emperor I've ever seen because it looks like he's getting really excited about having something going in his nose. It's like, yeah, it's in my nose, yeah. Why is it looking like that?
The Imperium is a rotting carcass of an empire, a fascist, xenophobic cult that worships the Emperor as a deity despite him never wanting to be seen as a god.
The best part about that, he explicitly didn't, not even just that he didn't want to, he explicitly outlawed it and killed people for doing it. It's literally torture. Also, heavily hinted that, no, he is a god. Like, full stop, it's the case. He probably knew it already and did not like it.
God. Over the span of 1 million worlds, the ecclesiarchy, the church of the Emperor, is spread throughout. Inquisitors with unparalleled power root out any sign of heresy or lack of devotion to their god Emperor.
Specifically as they see fit. As they see fit. And if that sounds like that could be highly subjective and cause conflict and more problems, yeah, it does. It's a lot of the problems. They solve more than they destroy, but
the other half of the traitor legions move about as Chaos Space Marines, raiding and pillaging the Imperium, while the loyalist half does their best to keep the Empire alive. All throughout this, they
also, the funny thing about that, it's like, yeah, Chaos has the advantage. They're eventually going to win, and the Imperium can't possibly win, even though every time it's kind of like, oh yeah, and the Imperium won again. Let's ignore that because it doesn't fit the narrative.
Must endure orc invasions, Eldar trickery, the reawakening of the Necron race, and the Great Devourer, the newest tyrannid threat from the darkness between galaxies that has arrived to feast on their worlds.
Also, it's just funny to me that newest needs to be in air quotes because this is really obscure lore where no, they've been here. A lot of the megafauna, every now and again, it's tyrannid. Just really out of control over maybe a millennia, multiple millennia, almost like 100+ millennia. I wonder what happened that long ago, like some kind of war, maybe like in the sky or something, like what would they call it, the heavens or something like that. That's crazy. Yeah, shocking that.
The theme of Warhammer 40,000 is regression and intolerance. Every major faction in Warhammer has had an empire that spanned the galaxy only to be crushed back to a hollow shell of what they once were due to their own failings. Culture, the arts, personal freedom, religious tolerance, the simple possibility that alien life might not want to kill us is considered heretical and is often met with a pistol to the head.
That's mostly true. There's a lot of stories where that isn't always the case, where especially the Aeldari and the Space Marines make friends, but also Friends is heavily in air quotes, and more often than not, space does want to eat you. So, yeah.
There's no time for these things. All there is time for is worship of the God Emperor and a million wars to be fought. To be a human in the 41st millennia is 99% of the time to live a horrible existence. To be one of trillions of other humans across a million worlds throughout the galaxy. A galaxy.
Honestly, it's probably multiple for, with how many hive cities there are, trillions might actually be on the low end. Because there's billions of people on this planet right now, close to 9 billion. I don't think we've reached it yet, but I could be mistaken. Hive planets are that taken to 11, and I mean a factor of sometimes. And then there's multiple hive planets, and then there's almost an uncountable number of worlds. Saying there's a million is a gross misinterpretation. It's way more than that. Now, developed worlds is different, but so quadrillions might not be inaccurate. But, I mean, numbers are weird when you get to this level. It doesn't actually have meaning anymore. It's more just to look big than anything else.
See, where AI is outlawed, so humans are repurposed and lobotomized to become slaves.
And then they also explicitly ignore the fact that they are still using AI. And I don't mean that in the hypocritical sense. I mean they've regressed far enough that they don't even realize some of the ships are AI. It's actually in the story how sometimes that is mentioned. It's funny because they show how powerful they are, and it's absolutely insane and terrifying. It's really awesome because of it.
A place where lack of devotion is met with death. And if you even have devotion, there's a good chance the threats to the galaxy, chaos, and aliens will kill you anyway. Yeah. Warhammer is a world where you revel in being bad. There are protagonists, there are antagonists, but every fact.
The funny thing about Abaddon, may or may not be a protagonist, but that's depending heavily on, did you read Aaron Dembski-Bowden? If you get that reference, you know he's a very well done, very qualified writer who fanboys over chaos really hard. By admittedly sometimes going too far, but also generally writing them in a very interesting way.
Action is some shade of evil, because playing the bad guys is always more fun, and my friend, you have a selection. So pick up that lasgun soldier. You and the other 3 million men and women in this single deployment on this single world in this single battle will now show them the might of the God Emperor. That weapon in your hands has killed 99% of the alien populations in this galaxy. Unfortunately for you, soldier, you're fighting the final 1%. May the Emperor be with us. Glory to the first man to die, for in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
And he said the quote. Dude, World Eaters? I heard they came out. I missed all of that because I didn't know anything about it. Is that multiple demons? Oh, space battles. The lion coming back, I heard about that. Jump jets. And that was actually a really good straightforward look at the base level lore when it comes to Warhammer. It didn't go into a lot of the more in-depth lore, which I probably, I admit, I geeked out way too hard about all of the little nitty-gritty details, but that's literally my favorite part about the lore itself, so I'm going to let myself pass on that one. Weird way to put that, but okay. With one exception being the first Primarch film is definitely Horus. The wink, wink, nod, nod, say no more, say no more. I love that he put that in there because I love those little nods to this, knowing that the lore is changing finally, not just in the future, but in the past as we find out more, because for so long, 40K felt incredibly stagnant. Most of its timeline was, here's in the past is interesting, the future, it's the same decade for the last 30 years. That's a joke because the timeline didn't move forward for literally almost 30 years of the game's existence. 20 years of that is a joke. The first 10 years is everything just coming together. But now things are changing, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but always it's interesting, at least. Personal opinion. I just like change and seeing what they try to do, so I just have a much higher threshold for the bullshit they randomly throw out there and ignore the stuff I don't, because there's so many things I don't like that they have already done that are so much worse than anything they've done now. I'm looking at you, Inquisitor. I keep bringing you up because repressed rage. and the absolute fear that that is an accomplished author who wrote that novel, that they got someone who could write a good book to write this. I won't say more about it because it actually hurts me to think about it. For everyone who has PTSD from me always mentioning it, I am actually sorry. I truly am. More importantly, though, I kind of want to check out his other stuff. The entire faction breakdown he did. I know there's 2 parts. They've come up on our recommendations a lot, and for some reason, I've never checked them out. I know that's weird, but also it's the kind of thing I usually do check out on my own time, and I just didn't. If I should, let me know. Otherwise, I might just do it anyways because it sounds like it might be fun. And I liked how he went into the timeline. If that's kind of what he's doing with the other factions, I'd like to know more because I like hearing other people's takes on what they view the factions as. Not just, here's what it is, but he put in enough of his own thoughts in here and some of the little nods that I want to see what he would do for the others. If you want to see that, let me know. Otherwise, I need to go to bed because it's a lot later than I realized, and I have probably kept my wife up, and that is a problem. Oh, I'm in trouble. Yeah, I did not realize it's almost that late at night. Oh, shit. I'm being loud. I should probably not be shouting. Oops. But yeah, link below, video, hit it up. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.